A storm of dying starlight rippled across the void as the refugee fleet limped toward the small blue world its shattered cultures had whispered about for generations. A world rumored to be untamed, volatile, strange, yet willing to shelter those the galaxy had abandoned. The last arc ships of the Vorathi Alliance drifted like wounded leviathans, their hulls scorched, their engines coughing out the final breaths of civilizations hunted to the edge of extinction. They expected silence from the planet below. Maybe suspicion. Maybe indifference. Instead, they received a message in a language translated instantly, delivered with a clarity that pierced the static between galaxies. We see you. We know you are running, hold position. Help is coming. Even in their despair, the refugees felt something shift. Not hope, something deeper. A steadiness. A spine. From the clouds below, a formation of human vessels rose, sleek, angular, built with the unmistakable confidence of a species that had looked at the abyss more than once and refused to blink. Leading the formation was a massive cruiser whose hull bore no ornamentation, only a single phrase etched into its armor plating: "We prepare for the storm." The humans did not ask who was chasing the fleet. They simply moved into position, absorbing the refugees behind a shield lattice that shimmered like a silver dawn. The refugees were escorted toward orbit, where colossal orbital stations, some under construction, some alive with activity, waited like guardians shaped from raw steel and stubborn will. As the arc ships passed through the defensive grid, they witnessed industries awakening. Thousands of drones welding new spines into station hulls. Massive human construction ships rearranging orbital frameworks with the efficiency of ancient craftsmen rebuilding a city after a calamity. Entire battlegroups powering up as if a single order had echoed through every command deck. It wasn't the response of a frightened world, it was the response of a species preparing for a fight. Inside the flagship's observation deck, a human officer watched the incoming vessels with calm eyes. The kind of eyes that had seen war and drawn strength from it rather than fear. He stood with his hands behind his back, posture unflinching, gaze steady. "You came here seeking shelter," he whispered, not into the air, but into a recorder file meant for his crew. "That's what they think we're giving them. But shelter is not what humanity offers. No. Humanity offers something far more difficult for the enemy to swallow: revenge." Below the fleet, the planet rotated with the quiet confidence of a species that had built itself from nothing, clawing upward through centuries of storms, mistakes, losses, and victories carved from impossible odds. The newcomers saw continents veined with cities glowing like constellations on the surface. They saw the scars of wars long past, and the infrastructure that showed humanity never wasted a lesson. Children played near starship launch rails. Students practiced piloting in simulated gravity wells. Civilians moved through transit lines that bordered armored bunkers disguised as museums, gardens, ancient ruins. This wasn't a civilization built for war, it was one built for survival, and survival meant readiness. The refugees saw it all. And for the first time in generations, they felt something unfamiliar rising in their chests. The stirring of a belief they had buried beneath loss. Maybe this small blue world was exactly what legend claimed, a place where the hunted became the armed. Where fear became strategy, where survival became retaliation. The void trembled as long-range sensors detected a ripple, the first wave of the enemy chasing them. A distant surge of power from predators who thought they had cornered their prey. The humans detected it instantly. Engines across the orbital stations roared. Power grids surged. Command decks lit up with icy determination, and the refugees realized the truth. They had come seeking shelter, but the humans were already preparing for war. The storm was coming, and humanity had decided to meet it head-on. Night fell across Earth, but the darkness did little to calm what was awakening in orbit. Human battlegroups aligned themselves like constellations forged from steel and fire. Carriers opened their vast hangars, revealing rows of strike craft humming with caged potential. Artillery ships charged their spinal cannons, each one capable of carving a scar across the void. And among it all, the refugee arc ships drifted under the protective umbrella of a civilization they barely understood. Inside one of the human command decks, a group of engineers worked with the speed of people accustomed to deadlines measured in heartbeats. They patched alien hulls, stabilized decaying reactors, replaced burnt-out shielding with human-made plating. Their hands moved with purpose, not pity. The refugees watched these strangers work with a shared, quiet awe. No species in the Alliance had ever moved with such relentless urgency for the sake of outsiders. A young Vorathi historian, her eyes still ringed with exhaustion from the long escape, whispered that humans were strange, kind, but fierce, almost inconveniently so. Another refugee answered that perhaps kindness meant more when it came from those who never had enough to begin with. Humanity had not been gifted safety. They had built it, the sensors flared, the enemy fleet was approaching. Not cautiously. Not hesitantly. It arrived like a hammer swung with full confidence, tearing a hole through the dark as it transitioned from FTL. The Vorathi ships recoiled at the familiar sight, sleek black hulls, predatory silhouettes, weapons already glowing with anticipation. The Draken Imperium had arrived. For centuries, the Draken had crushed worlds like a casual habit. They were efficient, merciless, and convinced that no prey had ever escaped them. Their war doctrine was simple: chase until caught, conquer until silent, burn until forgotten. They expected no resistance today. They had followed a broken fleet to the edges of a backwater system. They intended to finish what they started, but humanity was not prey, and this would not be a silent end. The moment the Imperium dropped into real space, humanity spoke, not with words, but with light. A wall of energy surged from Earth's orbital grid, a shield lattice so wide it looked like a rising sunrise across the void. It shimmered with a cold, unyielding beauty, turning aside the first barrage of Draken lances without a flicker. The refugees gasped, expecting the shield to fail instantly, but the human grid barely rippled. Deep within the flagship, the commanding officer studied the enemy formation. His expression did not harden. It did not falter. It became absolutely still. Then he gave the quietest order of his life. The battle groups advanced. Like a storm given shape, human ships accelerated with machine precision. Squadrons of bombers cut through the black, engines glowing like a constellation waking from slumber. Interceptors formed a living shield around the refugee flotilla. The human heavy cruisers at the front unleashed their opening salvo, long-range plasma tridents that streaked across the void and shattered against Draken armor. Forcing their vanguard to break formation, the Imperium had expected to hunt the weak. Instead, they had collided with something immovable. Humanity fought with clarity. No desperation. No panic. Every maneuver executed as though rehearsed for decades. The Draken charged, confident in their superior numbers. Human commanders responded by shifting the battlefield itself, projecting false signatures, warping sensor echoes, dragging the enemy into kill corridors designed minutes earlier by tactical AIs and validated by human instinct. The lone arc ship drifted close to the human lines, its refugees watching the unfolding battle with trembling disbelief. The humans did not simply fight to protect them. They fought to punish. Heavy bombardment ships unleashed quakes of energy that rippled across the battlefield. Draken capital vessels lurched, their hulls cracking under precision fire. The Imperium forces, accustomed to breaking weaker foes with overwhelming aggression, found themselves caught in an iron spiderweb of human strategy. The Draken commander, a veteran of 1,000 conquests, attempted to regroup his vanguard. The humans did not allow it. From behind the moon, a formation of stealth bombers emerged, gliding like shadows across the starlight. They fired a synchronized payload of magnetopulse torpedoes that detonated inside the Draken flagship's shields, warping its armor into molten scars. The Draken were stunned, not by the damage, but by the intent. Humanity's message was unmistakable: you chase them into our sky, you hunt them no more. In the cold silence between millions of tons of moving metal and searing plasma trails, the galaxy witnessed something it had not seen in centuries. A hunted people standing behind a species that refused to bow, a predator realizing, for the first time, it had misjudged its target. As the first Draken battleship fell blazing into the void, the refugees understood a truth that had never been spoken to them, only whispered as legend. Humans do not offer shelter, they offer resistance. They offer retaliation. they offer defiance. And now, the enemy that had chased them across stars would learn what that truly meant. The battle stretched across the starfield like a tapestry of fire and defiance. What began as a defensive wall had transformed into a counteroffensive with the force of a rising tide. Human cruisers weaved through gaps in the Draken formation, their thruster wakes carving luminous arcs across the dark. The refugees could see it even from their drifting arc ships. The humans fought not with numbers, but with precision learned through centuries of surviving the impossible. A moment of eerie calm settled as two fleets circled each other in brutal orbit. Wreckage floated like broken monuments. The Draken Imperium, shaken but not broken, prepared their next assault. Their reserve legion arrived, emerging from warp in phalanx formation. Dozens of heavy destroyers. 6 dreadnoughts. Enough firepower to erase a continent, but the humans did not recoil. Their ships adjusted, stabilized, and waited with unsettling focus. It was as though every vessel carried the heartbeat of the same unyielding will. Amid the drifting shadows of ruined hulls, Commander Hale of the human flagship stood before a holographic battlefield. His eyes moved with quiet intensity as patterns unfolded, enemy power signatures, their firing cycles, their warp cooldowns. A human strategist did not merely observe the present. They hunted the future hidden within it. In the refugee flotilla, silence turned into a trembling hope. They had heard stories of human resilience, but stories were soft things compared to the reality blooming before them. The humans were not improvising. They were orchestrating. The next wave crashed forward. Draken dreadnoughts opened fire with continent-cracking beams, carving long scars of ionized light across the void. Human ships responded not by outrunning them but by turning the battlefield itself against the attackers. Gravity mines flared awake. Decoy fields shimmered. Electromagnetic curtains bent enemy trajectories just enough to pass harmlessly through empty space. It felt almost like the humans were gently redirecting anger itself. Then came the moment the Imperium had never experienced, an opponent refusing to break under superior strength. A swarm of human strike craft ignited their engines and launched in synchronized formation. Their approach pattern was a razor-thin helix, threading through the barrage of enemy counterfire. The formation was not automated, nor AI-guided. Every pilot flew manually, every maneuver choreographed through shared instinct. When they reached the first dreadnought, the void bloomed with controlled brilliance. Plasma lances from dozens of human bombers pierced the dreadnought's armor. Explosive decompressions tore across its flanks. The Titan of War, once unstoppable, heaved sideways, burning like a falling star. The Draken commander roared orders through his fortress bridge as the impossible unfolded. The humans weren't simply fighting back. They were dismantling the Imperium's certainty. As the dreadnought imploded, a shockwave of force rippled across the battlefield and illuminated something the refugees had not yet seen. Massive frames rising from behind Earth's shadow. Humanity's orbital foundries had awakened. Colossal construction rings unfolded like iron flowers, releasing ships still hot from the forge. They emerged with incomplete paintwork, exposed frames, glowing cores, but fully armed. These were emergency dreadnoughts. The kind humanity built only when extinction was on the table, yet they were not built for humanity today. They were built for strangers they had chosen to protect. One newly forged dreadnought rotated, its cannons aligning with silent authority. The Draken ships faltered, caught between confusion and realization. The humans were growing stronger during the battle, not retreating, not recovering, building. Then Earth's new dreadnought fired. A beam of star-scorching light ripped across the void and cleaved through an entire wing of Draken destroyers. The flash turned night into day on the refugee arc ships. When the glare faded, drifting metal and fractured armor floated where a battle formation once stood. The Imperium hesitated. No enemy, no empire, had ever caused them to hesitate. Humanity took that breath of uncertainty and used it as a weapon. They surged. Dozens of human warships accelerated with impossible unity. Their bombardment crashed into the Draken lines like a rising storm, scattering formations, collapsing shields, forcing the Imperium to confront a reality they had never prepared for. The hunted were no longer hunted. The hunted had found guardians, and those guardians were terrifying. In that moment, the galaxy witnessed the first fracture in the confidence of a conquering empire. The humans weren't just fighting for victory, they were fighting to prove that no one seeking refuge under their sky would ever flee again. And for the first time, the Draken Imperium understood the truth whispered in old star taverns and forgotten war logs. When humans arrive, the battlefield changes, forever. The battlefield stretched across hundreds of kilometers of orbital space, a deadly ballet of light and metal. Sparks arced between drifting hulls, torn fragments of destroyed vessels spinning slowly against the void. Each human ship moved with a grace that belied the violence surrounding it, their engines carving streaks of light like celestial brushstrokes against the darkness. Refugees watched from the arc ships, their eyes wide as they realized that humanity had built more than defense, they had built inevitability. On the human flagship, Commander Hale studied the enemy fleet with the meticulous patience of a man who had been bred for this moment. Every Draken maneuver had already been anticipated, catalogued, and countered in simulations decades old. Yet his mind was not bound by calculations alone, he sensed the flow of battle, the rhythm of enemy aggression, and the pulse of his own fleet as if it were a single, living entity. The humans did not fight as individual ships, they fought as a thought made manifest across steel, fire, and plasma. One of the Draken dreadnoughts surged forward, attempting to flank the human formation and break the orbital shield grid. Its cannons opened fire, spewing a torrent of particle beams toward the arc ships. The refugees braced, expecting annihilation. Then the shield lattice shimmered, expanding and folding around the incoming fire like water around stone. The beams struck and fragmented, scattering into harmless arcs of light. Not a single refugee vessel was touched. Not a single life threatened. Humanity had not merely intercepted the attack, they had absorbed it, redirected it, and transformed it into a spectacle of unshakable dominance. From the shadows of the planet's night side, human orbital builders continued their work. Massive cranes swung unfinished dreadnoughts into alignment, each new vessel emerging from the void of construction with engines alive. Weapons online, and hulls gleaming with raw, unpolished power. Even incomplete, they radiated an aura of invincibility. The Draken commander could feel it, enemy numbers were multiplying mid-battle, and the humans were orchestrating the reinforcements with frightening precision. Every structure, every new warship, every drone seemed to pulse with intent. In the vacuum, a squadron of human interceptors dove toward the Imperium vanguard. Their movements were fluid, almost organic, weaving through incoming fire and engaging in dogfights with brutal efficiency. Each pilot was a master of instinct and training, a single heartbeat in the symphony of human resistance. When the first interceptor collided with a Draken assault frigate, it was not a crash but a calculated strike, designed to cripple without collateral damage. The frigate's systems faltered instantly, and a controlled explosion flared across its side. The Imperium had seen coordinated attacks before, but never with this level of precision, this level of discipline, and this level of intent. Back on the flagship, Hale activated the next phase. A series of energy nodes buried within the orbital grid began to glow, creating invisible fields that warped gravity around the enemy fleet. Draken ships listed uncontrollably as engines struggled to compensate. Missiles and torpedoes that had been carefully aimed were deflected, and long-range beams flared against unexpected resistance. Their impact points missing by mere meters. The humans had turned the battlefield itself into a weapon. Amid the chaos, the refugees realized another truth: the humans were not simply protecting them, they were teaching them. Every maneuver, every formation, every counterattack was a lesson in defiance, a demonstration of how a species that had been cornered, hunted, and underestimated could rise to dominate the very space around them. The youngest Vorathi engineer, eyes shining, whispered that humanity fought like they were shaping reality itself, bending it to their will rather than submitting to fear. The Draken commander, frustrated and enraged, attempted to regroup his fleet, issuing orders through channels that had never failed before. But the humans anticipated each move before it could be executed. Mines activated in predicted corridors, interceptors blocked escape routes, and human dreadnoughts delivered crushing volleys with flawless timing. One by one, the Draken ships were isolated, forced to fight alone against multiple threats simultaneously. The flagship of the Imperium itself sustained serious damage, its shields flickering as if even its centuries-old design could not anticipate the relentless coordination of human strategy. Hale's eyes scanned the void. He did not celebrate victories. He did not mourn losses. He simply observed, calculated, and adjusted. A new wave of orbital reinforcements emerged, partially constructed cruisers now operational, their weapon systems firing in perfect sync with established battle groups. Each vessel, even while unfinished, carried a statement: humanity does not wait for perfection. Humanity acts, adapts, and survives. They were teaching the universe a lesson written in steel, fire, and determination. The battle reached a fevered crescendo. Explosions blossomed across the void in patterns almost artistic in their symmetry. Smoke trails, particle beams, and hull fragments danced in arcs that reflected both chaos and order. The Draken Imperium, a force that had conquered dozens of worlds without resistance, began to falter. Their formations broke. Their numbers dwindled. Their confidence eroded before a species that refused to bow, refused to cower, refused to surrender. In the midst of it all, the refugee fleet moved behind humanity's protective curtain, watching the impossible unfold. They saw the raw pride, intelligence, and moral depth that had been drilled into every human vessel, every human crew, every human mind. And in that moment, a spark ignited in their hearts. Perhaps, they thought, it was not too late. Perhaps a hunted species could still be saved. Perhaps the universe could yet witness defiance on a scale that rivaled the predators who had chased them for centuries. The final wave of human dreadnoughts surged forward, engines glowing like miniature suns. Their arrival turned the tide definitively. Draken ships were corralled, disabled, or destroyed. Orbital stations extended additional shielding to intercept debris. Interceptors patrolled relentlessly, leaving no vulnerability unguarded. Humanity was no longer defending, they were dominating, teaching, protecting, and reshaping the rules of engagement in real time. As the battle began to subside, a fragile silence settled over the orbit. Draken remnants retreated toward warp lanes, battered and confused. The human fleet remained poised, engines humming, weapons ready. The Ark ships floated safely behind them, their crews stunned into awe and gratitude. For the first time in generations, they felt the promise of safety, not as a gift, but as a right enforced by those who understood the weight of survival and the strength required to defend it. Commander Hale looked down at the fragile fleet and whispered into the comm system, not for command, but for all to hear. They sought shelter, and we gave them something more. They will sleep tonight because we do not sleep. They will dream tonight because we defend dreams with steel, fire, and will. The stars beyond shimmered, reflecting the scars of the battle yet offering a quiet, enduring beauty. Humanity had fought, had prevailed, and had reminded the galaxy that refuge under their sky came with protection, pride, and a promise no predator could break. And somewhere beyond the rift, distant and unseen, the first ripple of another threat began to stir, a reminder that while humanity could defend, the void never rested. The Draken remnants limped away, their confidence shattered, their formations broken. Humanity's fleet did not pursue recklessly, they held the line, allowing the refugees to drift safely within the protective lattice of orbital defenses. The human dreadnoughts loomed like silent guardians, engines glowing softly, weapons ready, a warning that no predator would find weakness here. Refugees whispered among themselves, awe and disbelief mixing with gratitude. They had expected shelter, maybe assistance, perhaps even neutrality. Instead, they had witnessed mastery. Humanity had not only defended, they had rewritten the rules of engagement in real time. In the flagship's command deck, Hale watched the fading shadows of retreating enemy ships. There was no celebration, only measured satisfaction. Every ship, every crew, every action had been precise, deliberate, necessary. Humanity had not acted out of pride, it had acted because survival demanded cunning, courage, and an unbreakable will. Outside, orbital forges continued their quiet hum. Construction drones repaired damaged stations even as new vessels joined the fleet. Humanity did not rest after victory, they prepared for what came next. They had learned from the battle that survival was a relentless pursuit, that even the victorious must anticipate the next storm. The refugees realized the truth in a moment of fragile quiet. The humans did not merely offer shelter. They offered certainty. They offered strength. They offered hope forged in fire and tempered in battle, and above them, the stars shimmered, scarred but calm, as if acknowledging the presence of a species that refused to yield. The void settled into an uneasy calm. The Draken fleet had vanished into warp lanes, diminished and cautious, leaving behind only drifting wreckage and the silent hum of human vigilance. Orbital stations and warships glowed softly. Their lights reflected in the eyes of the refugees who floated in awe, finally able to breathe without fear. Commander Hale moved through the flagship, surveying damage, checking systems, and acknowledging crews with quiet nods. There was no jubilation, only focus. Humanity had won this battle, but the universe was vast, full of threats that did not rest, that did not forgive. Victory was measured not in destruction, but in survival, in preparation, in the unwavering will to meet the impossible. From the observation deck, Hale watched the planet below. Cities shimmered under twilight, a mix of human ingenuity and natural beauty. Rail lines hummed, energy grids pulsed, and children played near launch bays where young pilots trained for battles they did not yet know would come. This was the world they defended, not for glory, not for conquest, but for the right to exist and to give sanctuary to those who had lost everything. A faint ripple passed through the void, an echo from the rift that had carried the Draken. Hale did not flinch. He had anticipated it. Humanity had always known that safety was temporary, that predators waited for moments of weakness. Yet for now, the fleet held, the Ark ships were safe, and the humans had proven that even the most formidable enemy could be met with strategy, courage, and unshakable resolve. The refugees whispered, unable to fully comprehend what they had witnessed. One young engineer turned to another and said, almost reverently, that the humans were not just survivors, they were guardians, warriors, builders, and teachers all at once. They did not merely give refuge, they gave the tools and the will to endure, to fight, and to rise. Hale activated a long-range scan, observing the empty corridors of space. For now, the threat had passed. But humanity remained vigilant. Their ships floated poised, ready, engines thrumming like a heartbeat that would not stop. The Ark ships, once lost and hunted, now rested under the protection of a species that refused extinction, a species that had made a promise not through words but through action. And in the quiet aftermath, as stars shimmered and the planet below turned beneath the human fleet, Hale whispered softly, not for command, but for memory, we survive. We endure. We rise. The stars held their silence, and for the first time, the refugees felt what it meant to be truly safe, if only for a moment.